Talk to him about that. Or maybe you could talk to our other ho Santa Claus here. I think we're the only congregation on the planet that has two Santas. And that's a good thing. Well, this last week was a week, was it not? Cancellations, closings, delays, stranded people, stranded vehicles, sand and salt, bread and milk, sleds and hills, warnings and detours. What a week. It put us in crisis mode. We couldn't really have anticipated the extent of the crisis because we never know how far we are from a crisis. On a much more somber note, think about the horrific shooting in Tucson and the effects that that had on our country. It has raised the conversation and demand for renewed civility. And all the while that crisis is taking place, there are miracles that are happening. The Congresswoman's rapid recovery, and her staffer, who was shot through the arm but continues to have full use of hand. Figure that. While we don't know how far we are from a crisis, we can be confident that God is there. And then even closer to home, maybe some of you who are a regular listener to WSB Radio were as stunned as I when you heard the news that producer Royal Marshall had passed away suddenly at the age of 43, leaving behind two small daughters. Slipping on the ice, shootings born of rage, sudden illness. We never know how far we are from a crisis. So this begs the question. When crisis comes calling in my life, and it will, how shall I answer? How do I respond? In the Gospel of Luke, we read of 3 instances where Jesus helped other people deal with crises in their life. Luke reports that Jesus calmed a storm on the sea. He cured a demoniac and raised Jairus' daughter from her deathbed. I want us to focus on these 3 events this morning. You'll find them in Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. One day Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross over to the other side of the lake. Make a note of that. Jesus said, let's cross over to the other side of the lake because we're going to come back to it in just a minute. So they got into the boat and they started out. On the way across, Jesus lay down for a nap, and while he was sleeping, the wind began to rise. A fierce storm developed and threatened to swamp them, and they were in real danger. You never know how far you are from a crisis. The disciples woke him shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. So Jesus rebuked the wind and raging waves. The storm stopped and all was calm. Then Jesus asked his disciples, where is your faith? The Bible describes the storm as the winds were rising and the waves were raging. The crisis was that the boat was about to sink. But was that the real crisis? Maybe the real crisis in this moment was that the disciples had already decided how this crisis was going to turn out. Do you see that? We are going to drown. When we face crisis, we can't immediately determine how this is going to play itself out. With a rebuke from Jesus, the winds were calmed, the waves subsided, and then I think Jesus addressed what is the deeper crisis in that moment. He asked, where is your faith? When crisis calls, faith can become at risk. there is great opportunity to jump to conclusions about how that crisis may end. And taking advantage of that opportunity to jump to conclusions about how that crisis may end may cause us to exempt faith from the crisis. When we face crisis, we need faith all the more. When crisis calls, it is also an opportunity, a great opportunity, to exercise our faith. Perhaps when crisis comes calling, we need to ask ourselves the same question that Jesus asked to his disciples, which is, where is your faith? Where is my faith when I face the crisis? I think it's important that when crisis calls, and it will, that we make getting in touch with our faith the first step in facing a crisis. Get your balance, take a deep breath, and find your faith. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. The first step in facing a crisis is find your faith. I would like you to note that the crisis that the disciples were facing was of natural causes. Natural events can cause cataclysmic crises. Just a little over a year ago, the people of Haiti entered a crisis of epic proportions. You remember that? As a result of an earthquake. In an article titled "Faith Shines Through Destruction in Haiti," Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Bob Braun writes from Port-au-Prince. You got that picture there for me, Tony? Did God abandon Haiti? No, say its people of faith. And there are many here in a place without much beyond faith. The earthquake was a sign of God's presence. So it should be no surprise that on a narrow street, choked by debris, outside a church with a shattered ceiling open to the morning sky, what was left of the congregation of Haiti's Second Baptist Church stood in a courtyard and waved their hands in the air and shouted, "Victoire! Victoire!" Is that right, Jude? Which means victory. You can't claim victory in a crisis unless you first find your faith. When crisis calls, find it, your faith. Jesus' journey continues. And he encounters a man possessed by demons. Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 30. So they arrived in the land of the Gerasenes across the lake from Galilee. As Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. Homeless and naked, he had lived in a cemetery for a long time. As soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell to the ground before him, screaming, "Why are you bothering me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. This spirit had often taken control of the man, even when he was shackled and with chains. He simply broke them and rushed out into the wilderness, completely under the demon's power. The presence of evil is a continuing source of crisis. Personal, family, community, nation, and world. Peter, a disciple of Jesus, explains the problem of evil using this analogy, saying, "Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." Jesus himself faced evil. not only in the wilderness before he began his ministry, but also even here as we've read today. The man before Jesus was completely under the influence of evil. Friends, that is a crisis of eternal proportions. And I ask you today, who among us have not felt, sensed, observed, or participated in the advance of evil? Yes, I said participated in the advance of evil. It is the Apostle Paul who soberly acknowledges, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." We have all faced evil.